one guy came into my office with Woodrow Wilson, an officer who had been in charge in the early days of security in Baghdad, near the Green Zone, and there was an awful fratricide, an awful friendly fire incident. He had Bradley fighting. He was in charge of a Bradley fighting vehicle, had his guys in front of the vehicle, a security detail, and when one of his guys turned the ignition on the Bradley vehicle, the current jumped right from the motor, the engine, right into the turret where there was a gun. And it blew off the face of one of his privates, Private Joseph Mayak. So this is what one of my interviewees, John Pryor, says to me. Let me read to you the words. Well, I was trying to capture the voices of the soldiers and think about it in terms of their own voices. I call this accident guilt. One of the Bradley, and he tells it to me with, you know, the riveted detail that someone who lives through this every day only knows. One of the Bradleys misfired. It was on the front gate and had a malfunction in it, and it took off literally a third of my private's face, Private Mayak. It was as if an ice cream scoop just scooped out his face. He survived the initial blast, if you can believe it. We were in the medic tent with him. It was one of the most traumatic things I've ever seen in my entire life. To literally see someone's face completely scooped out, to just see the very bottom of his jaw working. He couldn't see, he couldn't hear, he couldn't scream. I mean, he had no eyes, obviously, no face. I can only imagine the terror, the fear, the pain he was in. He couldn't breathe because he had no nose or no mouth to take in air. It was one of the few times in my life that I just cried, tears just screaming down my face, because I'm watching 10 people work on this kid. It was an unbelievable thing to see. And then he goes on to talk about what became a theme in the book, and that was the assignment of personal moral responsibility by all these soldiers. They weren't callous about war. They were not at all cavalier. They overextended, if you like, their responsibility to be able to impose moral order on the world, even when they couldn't control what they were seeing. This was an accident, you know, almost Greek tragic style. He says, the aftermath of that was the guilt of the situation, because I'm the one who placed the vehicles. I'm the one who set the security. Like most accidents, I'm not in jail right now. He was exculpated. He had a full review, and there was no criminal proceedings drawn against him. But it was a comedy of errors. I mean a tragedy of errors. Any one of the decisions made over the course of a 2-month period, and none of them really occurs to you at that time. Any one of those may have saved his life. So I dealt with and still deal with the guilt of having cost him his life, essentially. There's probably not a day that goes by that I don't feel that feeling. So, irrational, you might say, a philosopher might say, doesn't really track what he's really culpable for or what he's at fault for, but he feels it as a way of redeeming himself, as a way, it's therapeutic in a way, and it's reasonable in the sense that it keeps him in touch with what I say, this border passing, going back to his civilian self, but also his commander self. He's in charge of these guys. These are his boys. So the betrayal of a solidarity bond is what often is so strong. That feeling of betrayal. There's some psychoanalysts, and you know, this sort of Melanie Klein sense that you somehow harm the thing you love so much, and you betray the solidarity that you're trained to care so much about. In his case, the Marine battery was a Marine replacement battery was used, and it had the same voltage, but a different amperage, and in that made all the difference. And that battery is now prohibited, but at the time it was thought to be just fine. So that was a kind of accident guilt. Another